Covert narcissists are anything but assertive. They never externalize aggression. They seethe with bitterness and resentment and envy, and they channel their aggressive impulses via what is known as negativistic attitudes or passive aggression. Now, there are several videos on this channel dedicated to passive aggressiveness, and I will post one or two of them in the description of this video. And today we are going to discuss the manifestations of passive aggression, because passive aggression, like many other mental phenomena, has many guises and disguises, many forms of camouflage. Sometimes it doesn't appear to be any form of aggression, but it is. You see, covert narcissists are what we call violently innocent. Yes, you heard that correctly. Violently innocent. I think that all narcissists are violently innocent. And when this fact is pointed out to them, they claim victimhood. What on earth am I talking about? What is violent innocence? My name is Sam Vaknin. I'm the author of Malignant Self-Love, Narcissism Revisited, and I'm a professor of psychology. Like many other goodies in psychology, the term violent innocence was coined by Christopher Bollas, a psychoanalyst, American. And he used the phrase to describe a refusal which is cast in stone. A refusal goes hand in hand with obstinacy, obduracy, and fixation. A refusal to do what? A refusal to acknowledge the existence of alternative viewpoints. He called it a fascist construction. The outcome is to empty the mind of all opposition. Violent innocence started off this way, as a kind of construct intended to describe close-mindedness, the inability to contemplate another person's point of view, and a deficit in empathy. But it has since evolved. Bollas wrote, "Violent innocence is a term that posits that a person or an institution can cause significant harm while remaining morally ambiguous or seemingly unaware that they are causing it. The violent innocent sponsors affective and ideational confusion in the other, which he then disavows any knowledge of, this being the true violation." So there are a few components here. Let's separate them. The violently innocent is a person who refuses to contemplate anyone else's point of view. That's a person who is sanctimonious, self-righteous, self-justifying, always right, and so on. So this is one element in violent innocence. The other element, this kind of person is also very harmful, damages people, breaks them, causes deleterious effects in himself, in others, and in the environment. And all this time, this kind of person claims the high moral ground. At the very minimum, they say, "I'm not aware that I'm doing anything wrong. I'm not aware that I'm hurting anyone or harming anyone. That's all nonsense. And if I am hurting and harming anyone, it's because I'm oblivious to it. It's not intentional. I don't mean to do that. On the very contrary, my intentions are noble, and I aim to do good, the greater good, and good for others. I am possessed with empathy, with love, with kindness, with compassion, with affection. It's wrong to cast me or castigate me for being evil, so to speak." So the second element is ostentatious morality, which is a very prominent element in prosocial and communal narcissists. The third element is a lack of self-awareness regarding the impacts, outcomes, and consequences of one's decisions, choices, and actions. A fourth element is harmful behavior, especially to others, but also sometimes to oneself, and disavowal of any responsibility or accountability because of the claim of morality and a lack of self-awareness. Put all these together, and you have the violently innocent person. Of course, violent innocence is common not only, as I said, in covert narcissism, but also in overt narcissism. And in psychopathy, where, for example, people gaslight. Gaslighting is to make a series of claims about reality, about oneself and about others, which are counterfactual. These claims are either fantastic, grandiose, and inflated, or they're simply fallacious and, to a large extent, deceptive. Collectively, this is known as gaslighting, and gaslighting is a form of violent innocence, especially when the gaslighting is the outcome of confabulation, when there is no premeditation, when there is no intention to gaslight, but the outcome of the confabulation is gaslighting. In this particular case of confabulation in narcissism, the narcissist claims that the confabulation is real. He attributes to the confabulation veracity and factuality. He rejects any challenge to the confabulation. He insists that it's correct, it reflects reality. He insists that his reality testing is not impaired, it's intact and perfect, and even superior to other people. And so the confabulation leads to gaslighting, but all that, throughout all this, the narcissist feels morally superior and completely unself-aware. Whereas in psychopathy, there is awareness of the gaslighting taking place. The gaslighting in psychopathy is a Machiavellian manipulative technique. And all this creates what is known as epistemic injury, because the narcissist is very good at faking reality, at imposing fantasy on others, rendering other people willing accomplices, complicit in and colluding with him in the creation of the fantasy and so on. Other people who are victims are disbelieved. Victims are not validated, invalidated. Victims are challenged. People say to victims, you're exaggerating, it could have happened, you're wrong. And this is known as epistemic injury. At the same time, bystanders and observers experience moral injury. What I'm trying to say is that violent innocence is injurious. It's injurious not only to victims, it's injurious to society at large. It undermines the underpinnings of morality. It imposes a state of delirium, a paracosm, a fantasy on other people. It divorces people from reality. It challenges the foundations and pillars of what is real and what is not, and creates alternative and virtual realities, and then catapults people into them, never to return. So virtual innocence is a very serious process, which is problematic in more than one way. Sometimes the virtually innocent not only claim moral superiority, not only insist that they are not aware of anything wrong or anything bad or anything evil or anything malevolent and malicious that they're doing. I am not aware, you're wrong, my intentions are good. Not only this, but sometimes they insist on purity of procedure, adherence to rules and regulations. And this strict, robotic, automated following of rules, following of regulations, following of norms and conventions and scripts and mores, this suspension of agency, of judgment, of personal autonomy, of independence, this self-automatization, self-robotization, this leads to a kind of moral shielding. The individual is harming other people, hurting them, damaging them, breaking them apart, ruining their lives, and all the time the individual is hiding behind codes of conduct, codices, behind codified morality, behind rules and laws and regulations and norms and conventions, written or verbal. And throughout the process, the individual says, I have no choice. This is the law. There's nothing I can do. I can't help it. These are the regulations. It's a bureaucratic cop-out, obscuring the real-world consequences of action or inaction. The choice is framed as ineluctable, unavoidable, inevitable, because that's the way the world is, or that's the way the social contract is, or that's the way the law is, or that's the way the rules are, or that's the way regulations dictate, or these are the edicts and norms and mores and conventions of society, and so on and so forth. Hiding behind, shielding oneself from the consequences, from the adverse and morally dubious and duplicitous consequences of one's actions, behind a larger picture, the greater good, society, culture, civilization, a period in history, the collective. This is violent innocence. And Christopher Bollas was right to insist that violent innocence is a form of denial, an aggressive form of denial. In a recent interview in Huffington Post, the psychologist or therapist Alexandra Cromer described this kind of mindset as a sort of willful ignorance. She said, it means that an institution or a person is maintaining a level of unawareness to protect or preserve their belief that they are not harmful and do not cause active harm. In other words, there's a self-concept in the case of the individual, or even the institution, but we're focused on individuals right now. The covert narcissist and sometimes the overt narcissist, they have a self-concept of, I'm a good person. I'm a good person. And anything that flies in the face of this assertion is negated, vitiated, counter-attacked, deleted, denied, repressed, buried, and it creates aggression. And this aggression is channeled into morally acceptable, it's sublimated into morally acceptable forms of repression. And so violent innocence is a cognitive mechanism. People defend their self-concept against reality, against the fact that they're harming other people, that their actions are morally inferior or immoral, or at the very best, amoral. They're defending against this because they have this picture of themselves as prosocial, as communal, as great, as divine, as incapable of error, infallible. Cromer said in the interview, violent innocence can be dangerous because it posits that growth is not an ongoing process of gaining consciousness and awareness. And this is why violent innocence is very common in narcissism. Because the narcissist regards himself as the epitome of perfection, as having attained perfection. There's no need for perfecting oneself. There's no need for learning. There's no need for improving. There's no need for changing or transforming oneself. There's no need for opening oneself up to other people's opinions, judgments, and life experiences. When you are perfect, when you are godlike, when you're omniscient, when you're omnipotent, and so on, why would you? Why would you introduce the possibility of imperfection into your life and mind? You would reject any hint that you are in need of edification, of transformation, of improvement, of change. You would reject any of this. It's a harmful dynamic. And in interpersonal relationships with narcissists, you would often hear sentences like, I didn't mean to hurt you, so you shouldn't be upset. My intentions were good. This is tough love. I'm doing this for you. I have a video on this channel which describes the myriad hydra ways in which a narcissist self-justifies, in which a narcissist preserves his self-concept as all good, while actually splitting other people and rendering them all bad for pointing the finger at him, for accusing him, for blaming him, or for trying to make him aware, self-aware. So this is about righteousness. This is about self-righteousness. This is about self-justification. This is self-aggrandizement. I'm all good. This is about the primitive defense mechanism of splitting. Innocent violence is at the core of narcissism, because essentially the narcissist is not omnipotent, is not omniscient. The narcissist is pretty helpless, pretty damaged, pretty deficient. And this inferiority, this repository of shame that is all-consuming and life-threatening, is defended against via compensatory pathological narcissism. I'm not ashamed, I'm proud. I'm not inferior, I'm superior. I'm not stupid, I'm a genius. Exactly the opposite. Compensation, a fantasy, confabulation, a paracosm within which the narcissist can be anything but himself. Self-denial. When confronted with the suffering that narcissists actively enable or inflict, they deny the suffering, or they deny the intention, or they deny reality, or they deny the victim and invalidate the victimhood. They deny. This is their immediate response. Narcissists deny, period. And there's a refusal to see one's own contributions, one's own responsibility, and to be held accountable for this. Ironically, by minimizing one's contribution and oneself, the narcissist is actually saying, I am not omnipotent, I am not responsible for this. So violent innocence creates a dissonance. On the one hand, if you are all-powerful, if you're all-knowing, if you're godlike, then you're responsible for the suffering of other people, because you're the source of everything. You're the fount, you're the mover and shaker. If, on the other hand, you're not responsible for what's happening to people, then for their suffering, for their pain, for any harm, then you are not all-powerful and you are not all-knowing. And this is the dissonance which is embedded in violent innocence. Even the combination sounds like an oxymoron. When you insist as a measure of defense, defensively, when you insist defensively, I'm a moral person, I'm a good person, I'm a noble person, and there's nothing I can do. Nothing I can do because that's the law, nothing I can do because that's reality, nothing I can do because I don't have the resources, there's nothing I can do because I'm super moral or super righteous, super sanctimonious or whatever. When the minute you say the sentence, there's nothing I can do, you disown your agency. When you say this harm, this suffering, they're inevitable, I can only witness but nothing more, and often I deny that this is suffering, I deny that this is harm. When you're saying this, you are saying I'm helpless, I'm puny and pusillanimous, I have no agency, I have no power, the harm is inevitable, because I'm minimizing myself, I'm a nobody. There are greater forces and greater people at play. So this requires vanity, the opposite of vanity. This requires modesty. This requires to humble oneself, to eat humble pie. And narcissists are very bad at that. So this creates a dissonance. On the one hand, when the narcissist hurts other people, when the narcissist harms other people, when the narcissist damages other people, he wants to say, it's not my fault. But it's not my fault. When you say it's not my fault, it means also it's not in your power. And then it minimizes you. And if narcissism is about anything, it's about maximizing oneself. So there's a dissonance there, there's a clash, there's a conflict. And the innocence yields, the dissonance involved yields aggression, yields the violence. Alexander Cromer, in the aforementioned Huffington Post interview, said, people or institutions might insist on their own innocence, despite being given information that their decisions or inaction cause harm due to a desire to protect or preserve their view of self. Receiving feedback and a request for change is hard, but it is necessary. If you cling to the story, if you cling to your grandiose, fantastic, counterfactual, unreal self-image as all good, and at the same time you claim to be helpless, you sidestep accountability and responsibility. Obviously, you shield yourself morally, you preserve the self-concept, but there's a cost. And the cost is sacrificing your self-perception as godlike, as omniscient and omnipotent. So on the one hand, you're defending the self-concept by removing yourself from the scene of a crime, and on the other hand, you're undermining the self-concept because you render yourself childlike or helpless or hopeless or incapacitated in some way. And so this internal dissonance, this internal conflict leads to rising anxiety, because all dissonance leads to anxiety, and a lot of aggression. Cromer says, for some people, being made aware of hurt caused requires them to take active remedial steps. Many institutions and people have a hard time with this insight due to the fact that many view mistakes as permanent. In some instances, the people or institutions do believe that they're actually innocent and have not caused any harm, despite contrary feedback. Cromer says correctly that healthy, adaptive people and institutions view feedback, view education, view awareness as constants. Like change. Change is constant. It's all part of the ongoing process of personal development and growth. It's not a threat to identity, except in the case of narcissism, where the identity is fixated, rigid, ossified, and any challenge to it, however remote, however implied, however subtle, however nuanced, is catastrophized, and the narcissist reacts with rage, and if rage doesn't help, then passive aggression, and if this doesn't help, then there is a borderline state with emotion dysregulation and suicidal ideation ultimately. But violent innocence is only one aspect of passive aggression. Violent innocence is the claim of moral superiority. It's like saying, I ostentatiously conform to social mores and expectations and demands and conventions and norms. I ostentatiously conform to them, and my conformity is the cornerstone and the guarantee of my superior morality. This self-righteousness is a form of passive aggression, of course, because it allows such people to sabotage, to hinder, to obstruct the lives and goals and dreams and hopes and wishes and agency and autonomy of other people. They leverage this self-righteousness and sanctimoniousness as a weapon. They weaponize them against other people. They're always they're busybodies in many ways. They're nosy. They criticize other people, cajole them. They expose them. They attack them. And all the time there's a feeling of elation because they equate this with power. But again, this is only one form of passive aggression. There are many others. For example, procrastination. Passive aggression is sabotage. When you sabotage other people, you sabotage their happiness, their joy, you sabotage their lives, their goals and plans, their their cognitions, their emotions, their dreams and hopes and fantasies, their expectations. You sabotage. You constantly sabotage. That's what you do. This is passive aggression. And one way to do that is to procrastinate, to postpone everything to the last minute. And then, of course, to either not get it done or get it done wrongly or get it done in an inferior way, thereby undermining the path to accomplishments of other people. So procrastination is a form of passive aggression. Last minute delays, doing everything too late, disruptions, interruptions. And so the passive aggressive person would disrupt you, interrupt you, interfere, intervene, invade your space, your time. You're busy and they will just insist on having your attention and so on and so forth. And then when you decline or when you erupt with anger, they would guilt trip you. They would blame you for this. You see, the passive aggression goes hand in hand with a sense of victimhood. Generally, it's about victimhood. Narcissists constantly feel victimized. They constantly feel that they're victims because their aggression and their passive aggression are rejected by other people. And they don't see their aggression and passive aggression as forms of aggression. They reframe the aggression. They rewrite history. They're innocently violent. And they emphasize the innocence, not the violence. So when you reject them, when you decline, when you refuse to collaborate or to collude, when you push them away, when you shun them, when you avoid them, when you withdraw, when you protect yourself, they claim victimhood. They call you the abuser. Neglect and irresponsibility that are all pervasive and systemic, these are forms of passive aggression. Not doing things on time, not doing things at all, ignoring important information, acting in ways which are suboptimal, declining to assume responsibility for one's actions and choices and decisions. All these are forms of passive aggression. And when taken to extreme, it's indolence or laziness. Not the kind of indolence and laziness which are the outcome of a philosophy of life, like Big Lebowski, but indolence and laziness which are intended to prevent other people from accomplishing, to prevent other people from having a full life, a happy life. Laziness and indolence which stand in the way of processes. Laziness and indolence that undermine trajectories and paths, goals, dreams, hopes, wishes, plans. So indolence is the extreme form of neglect and irresponsibility. Generally, passive aggressiveness assumes either of two forms: performative obnoxiousness and performative submissiveness. Before I go into that, I want to explain the difference between performative and ostentatious. Both performative behaviors and ostentatious behaviors are visible, obviously. They can be witnessed. They are intended for public consumption. They're public facing. But performative behaviors are dictated by society. They involve social scripts. Whereas ostentatious behaviors are idiosyncratic. They're individualistic. They depend on the particular individual. So when you are performatively obnoxious, it means you are obnoxious the way society expects you to be obnoxious, the way society imagines obnoxiousness, the stereotype of being obnoxious. Then you are performatively obnoxious. When you're ostentatiously obnoxious, it's just because you are truly obnoxious. And you are even unaware that you're obnoxious. You feel hurt. You feel in pain when other people tell you that you're obnoxious. You reject it. You say it's not true. So this is ostentatious obnoxiousness. Whereas performative obnoxiousness is goal-oriented. It's a form of signaling. It's a form of coercive behavior modification. The obnoxiousness is intended to coerce people into modifying their behaviors or their perceptions or their cognitions and so on. So performative obnoxiousness is a form of signaling, it's coercive, and it is about modifying other people. And it's a form of branding. You're known as an obnoxious person. Your reputation precedes you, and people are wary of you. People not only avoid and shun you, but they obey you. It secures outcomes. But performative obnoxiousness, as well as ostentatious obnoxiousness, it's a form of passive aggression. The obnoxious person is not violent, definitely not physically, and often is not violent verbally. The obnoxiousness has more to do with contempt, more to do with disregarding other people, lack of empathy, than with any manifestations or transformations of aggression. And so it's a form of passive aggression. The alternative is performative submissiveness, obsequiousness, the pretension to conformity, going along with the flow. But it's all pretend, it's all fake, it's all ersatz. Under the surface, there is anger and rage and seething resentment and envy and plans to damage other people. Premeditation, malice, I would say. So performative submissiveness is a veneer, it's a facade. And sometimes narcissists use performative submissiveness in a Machiavellian manner. For example, if you threaten the narcissist with exposure or with the law or with, I don't know, the narcissist may pretend that he is afraid, may act in ways which communicate fear. Look at me, I'm terrified, and so on and so forth. All the time playing with your mind, manipulating your behavior. And so this is an example of performative submissiveness. And again, it's a form of passive aggression. Nothing in psychology has a single face. It all shapeshifts, metamorphoses. It's all mental phenomena, all psychological processes are multifaceted. And depending on the environment and on internal dynamics, they can wear guises, disguises, and masks, which are very, very misleading and very, very surprising. For example, violent innocence coupled with victimhood.